Rhapsody on the Dragoman. I am a dragoman, courtesan of the word. I pluck my eyes to hear, with skill and improvisation, worlds of hard edges, a treacherous and loyal exponent of obsessions. Not all men know my speech. In the night I go under in company of dervishes and learn why cyclamen sprout in pavement cracks and mutter promises amidst the dust of the beautiful and the unseen. I ask meaning for forgive, forgo, for play, an island warring, still with no quarrel, or a swallow in the line of flight, meandering with finality, knowing that the road is lost in floating debris, of fortuitous choices, precipitous moves. With impulsive sagacity, I swirl and sail away, vexed in my state of grace. Daytime, dragoman, nighttime, dervish. Δεδομένη η θάλασσα του Τρικόμου με τον παπά μου, πρέπει να ήταν το 57 το καλοκαίρι, πηγαίναμε στα λιβάδια του Τρικόμου ή κάποτε στο Πογάσι. Γεννήθηκα στο Τρίκομο το 1949. Τα πρώτα χρόνια της ζωής μου, δηλαδή μέχρι 8 χρονών, έζησα εκεί. Με τον παππού και τη γιαγιά κυρίως, επειδή οι γονείς μου εχωρίσαν όταν ήμουν πολύ μικρός, δεν τους θυμάμαι πολύ καλά μαζί. Στα 8 μου χρόνια, ξαφνικά με έπιασε ο πατέρας μου και με πήρε Αγγλία. Χωρίς να καταλάβω καλά πώς θα φεύγαμε, μου το είπε την τελευταία στιγμή. Ούτε ο ίδιος μου το είπε, να στείλει μια θεία να μου πει να πάμε ένα ταξίδι σε πλοίο και να πάμε Αγγλία. These are the first years in England when I was a young boy. I don't really like looking at these photographs because they weren't happy years. It was a difficult transition in my life. Ασυνείδητα έμαθα τα αγγλικά, ασυνείδητα τα ελληνικά άρχισαν να φεύγουν από τη ζωή μου επειδή δεν είχα κανένα με τον οποίο να μιλήσω. Αναγκαστικά σε λίγους μήνες μιλούσα σαν Mancunian. Μια μεταμόρφωση στον εαυτό μου και στη γλώσσα και στο περιβάλλον. Νομίζω με έχει επηρεάσει πάρα πολύ. Αλλά παρόλο που η εμπειρία ήταν σκληρή, νομίζω άνοιξε τη ζωή μου σε πολλούς κόσμους. I'll continue in English now, if that's okay. I think there's always a paradox in our relationship to language. Because as writers, we are, of course, obsessed with languages, but we're always probing its edges. And at the same time, although we're in language, we're trying to come out of language. I don't feel attached. Being attached to many languages, but at the same time, there's this process of wanting to become detached and be free of time and place. So you're constantly looking, tracing time and place and being free of it. Childhood in Trigomo. I lived with my maternal grandparents, who I have a very special feeling from, and up the road was my paternal grandmother, Ellen Gould, who was a widow. And she was a great storyteller. She would tell me stories about the family. She would read me stories. And she treasured me as the first grandson. And there's a very special affection there. She used to sing beautifully. Her memory still continues and has inspired my way of writing, amongst many other things. But I think the world I remember was essentially a female world, I would say. Η γιαγιά Ελενγκού και η γιαγιά Μιλιά, σαν ετοιμόρροποι στήλες σοφίας και αποκαμωμένοι φύλακες άγγελοι, ήταν για μένα ακρογωνιαίοι λύθοι σε αυτό το μικρό κομμάτι δρόμου που ήταν το λίκνο μου, το κουκούλι της ολομεταβολής μου. Obviously, for me as a young child, it was a time of innocence, even though the events around me there were violent events, both politically. It was a time of EOKA. The schools were often closed. And apart from that, my parents had separated and they left the village and moved to Nicosia, living apart, and they left me with my grandparents. This was a great privilege, I feel, because I experienced this rural world. When we had waters from wells, we had kerosene lamps for our light in the evening, and my feeling of freedom, knowing everybody in the street, going up in and out of people's houses. So it's a relationship that left a deep mark, both in terms of feelings and of images. I had a very special relationship with my mother. She was quite a distinct personality. She started a business, which was an amazing thing for a woman to do at that time. It was a bar cafe just opposite Platia Solomou. During this time, it was in 1957 that my father suddenly decided to migrate to Britain. And then the sense of loss of being away, and in your imagination you always try and recover it. As life goes on, the way you recover it is different, because there's always this process and dialogics of memory and forgetting and what people have told you and how these stories change. One interesting thing about my father is his love for photography. He had his camera and he had his dark room for developing. So he actually developed his own film. So I have a large collection of black and white photographs, especially throughout the 50s and maybe into the early 60s, and organized them into albums, writing down places and showing me my life. So in effect, it gave me a photographic journal of my first 8 years before we went to the UK. It's quite paradoxical, really, because in effect, he's telling me to remember. But my experience of my time with him in England is that he wanted me to forget. Why was this pull for me to go back, and why aren't I settling into England? And I always had this itch to find a way out of there. So after that, my mother remarried. Her husband was an American. They went to California, then to Taiwan. And then she sent for me while they were living in Taiwan. So my experience traveling to Taiwan, I went several times in the summers and getting to know that part of the world, it opened up my sense of possibilities of what the world can be. I was always the foreigner in the class. So learning foreign languages was also a sense of claiming my identity in different directions. So although I write in English, I was also curious about the challenges and the openness of English to other cultures. And that gave me something to enter. I began to learn the Romance languages, and I dabbled in all of them, French, Italian, Latin, but I became fluent in Spanish and Portuguese. So in the 70s especially, I got into those literatures and into Latin American literature, and I was in those countries all the time. and always dreamed of going beyond. And I think this was largely due to my mother's worldliness and the kind of personality she was. This is happy, wild student days. Great fun and wild years. I think it was 74 when he said, let's go back to the village together. I'm sure it was 74. I agreed, and then this was early in 74, and then in spring of 74 there was a Portuguese revolution where the dictatorship fell. And because at that time I was very close to the life in Spain and Portugal, I'd been visiting a lot, I wanted to go back and celebrate the revolution. When I come back, we can go to Trígono. And of course, what turned out is I was in Portugal when the coup and then the Turkish invasion happened. And I saw it in the Portuguese newspapers. The trip of us returning together to Trígono never happened. And I was very reluctant to go back to England. So I called up friends in Spain and they said, come to Spain. Franco had just died, so there was a whole opening up. But I had a tourist visa and I was freelancing, translating and writing my thesis. And I was musing about different places in the world or looking for a real university job. I saw that they were looking for someone who knew Spanish and especially Portuguese. I was fluent in Portuguese in the University of Guyana, this wedge of a country in Latin America, of which was not very deep in my consciousness, but I read a lot of Latin American literature, but there was this former British colony in the northeast. And I thought, well, let me write them, send in my CV, see what happens. And much to my surprise, they shortlisted me and they wanted me to go, but they were also resistant because they were in disbelief that there was this Cypriot who wanted to go to Guyana. Και πήρα τηλέφωνο τη θεία μου τη Λέλα στο Λονδίνο για να μου πει τον καφέ, να μου θυβάσει τον καφέ. Είπα, θεία, θέλουμε να πάω στην Γάνα, σαν να μην θέλουν να πάω. Τι έχει τούτη χώρα, τι πρέπει να κάνω. Αμέσως μου είπαν, πήγαινε και να ανοίξει ο κόσμος για σένα και να έρθει και εγώ να σε έβρω. Και πήγα και τελικά είναι πίστευκα πως ήταν. But she came I think it was 6 months later. And she came to celebrate her divorce. And I took her all over the place. We went on a boat up the Essequibo River and she blended in perfectly with everyone. She was like a Creole lady and they all loved her. Some diamond seeker was talking to her and then she came laughing to me afterwards and said he wants to marry me. So I said, marry him and we'll stay here. So I had great adventures with Lela. It was after she left that I got really into the rural areas and also one of the regions with the sugar plantations, the Berbice. So the experience of Guyanese culture was very stimulating for me. The Guyanese environment opened up the possibilities for me and the exposure to Caribbean literature and the experimental way that the Caribbean people use language and the imagination. Like linguistically was fascinating, hearing Creole and its multiple possibilities. And it's essentially an oral language on a spectrum. And I got very deeply absorbed by Hindu culture in particular. I encountered it by accident, driving around through villages or being invited by my students to different rituals. And I got that exposure. So I think what fascinated me especially was this combination of this intense spiritual and performative culture in the middle of this hard laboring situation and the way we carry culture across.
We let Indian come so far and become in a different country and we have problems. Do you please come and receive our prayer and show your blessing?
The oral tradition came before the written word, which I began to see as part of the wider scope of what literature can be. It's not just the written word. My childhood was essentially in an oral culture. So even though it seemed very far away, I had a sense of the predicament and the edge, not only between languages, but between oral performative culture and the written word. So it was totally fascinating, and it was also because I was always interested in language. It was an important part of my life, and it had a great impact on what I did the rest of my life as a creative writer as well, because it gave me new possibilities of writing. And I think that's when I began writing, seriously, if you like, escaping academic writing.
Much of his knowledge to answer his questions about myself. One should not be afraid at the time, because what one will be gaining at the time.
And it was during that time that I encountered the Shakti worship, or the goddess worship. It was very dynamic, intense, and that it had been transformed by oral memory from generation to generation. And although they have some texts, it was mainly the oral tradition that transformed it, and the performative tradition, so incorporates storytelling, performances that are related to theatre. So there's theatre, there's oral storytelling. Music is fundamental. I realized how ritual and writing are very linked together, because also when you're writing is a kind of performance. It's not a process of information. You write in a way that the language performs and reaches out in your inclusion, exclusion, selection, arrangement, and also memory. The processes of mediation that take place are different between memory and the written script.
Come here can receive the help of this.
Yes, as long as you have belief in the mother.
Yes.
We are the children of the mother, she receive everybody.
And as long as you have that belief.
So, and when I was asked to speak about, give a lecture the first time, it was a big conference in Guyana in 1988 about the legacy of indentureship, and they asked me to give a talk about this particular group. And I thought, well, I can only do it by, I think film has to come before writing about it, because film is closer to the oral tradition. And I said, if I'm talking about this academically, people are not going to be able to feel and envision the performance. So I think that the wanting to get into documentary filmmaking was to document the living performance. There are different ways of mediating, but the going into film is going back to the oral source. So for me, the film is primary.
Oh, Mother Kali, let me think of you. Please, Mother Kali, let me worship you, Mom.
This fascination with the culture in Guyana, I mean, it drew me in so much. I thought, I could stay here. I could live here forever, basically. I mean, I felt I found a place there. But the post-colonial politics were in a mess, which led to authoritarian government. I was torn. First of all, I thought I don't want to leave. I found something here. Yeah, everyone was leaving. And I wasn't sure what to do, but I decided there were many Guyanese friends that had gone to the US and they told me, come here. But for me, there was a deep sense of loss. And in effect, in my writing, one preoccupation is this constant flow of time, the sense of displacement, migration, loss, and retrieval. So I think we write because we're retrieving something. And in the process of retrieving, it's also getting lost. And I think this is part of what art is. And it's part of why do we want to make art of our experience. And I think it's because our experience never stands still, because we are temporal beings, we're embodied beings. And that's what interested me in the rituals of the Hindus, because it's about embodiment as well. What this body we inhabit, that we're in exile in this body, in effect. And that's what the rituals are dealing with. You emerge with the abandon of the light on your face, as if memory never existed, as if you never belonged to a lost island, licked her waters dry, lapped them up from every creek and crevice, an island that no longer exists, perhaps never was, and all that matters is this moment, in a faraway land, in the gentle sway of the hammock, and you hear a swish in your ribcage, and your heart rises high above the canopy of the coconut trees, and the coolie woman brings you a bowl of rice and dal. The cage door closes, and the coconut drops with a thud as you hear the labor in her bare feet resonate with your grandmother's footsteps. And you think of her house and ask, how much rubble must you pick up to rebuild it from the discarded limbs? Or just leave it to the strangers who inhabit it, and who in their strangeness resemble your kin, lying on the terrace on August nights and flying with the thrill of shooting stars. And it might suffice to feel the hammock embrace you like a call as you watch the elusive and nomadic clouds, always ready for an outpour of water, formless liquid that you want to catch by the bucketful, to remind you of your own torrential nature, and the sweetness of your skin, finding the balance between actuality and the memory. I went to the United States, although I never dreamt of ever wanting to go there. And I settled in Washington because I was a polyglot, where I could freelance as an interpreter and a translator. This is where I took on my identity as a dragomanos, if you like, because I was fluent in English, Spanish, Portuguese. I worked in booths. I trained first, of course. You need training if you're going to do it really well. And it was a place where I could use all my skills. And being a freelancer gave me time to write and think. But I always wanted to leave. I always preferred to be more on the edges of cultures, or rather than being in the middle, although it's interesting to be in the middle, in the Babylon, if you like. But I did meet my wife there. And my daughter was born there. It was during this time that my mother faxed me an announcement for the University of Cyprus, which was just beginning in 91. And she told me, you must apply. So that's how I came back. And I was part of the founding faculty, sitting in little offices and building up, writing programs, writing regulations. So I had this pioneering sense, and also the experience of return, and the young daughter who subsequently grew up here. So I was excited because I was coming to a place that was very intimate to me, but also very strange because what I cherished and remembered like no longer existed. You know, the village was over at the border. It had been transformed. So it was also exciting for me to get to know it again and to build up a new university from the very beginning. So I was able to bring those decades of experience into shaping up the literature education program, if you like. When the checkpoints opened in 2003, for me that was like a tremendous moment. And what was behind the wall was like a darkness, like the other world that you would never visit. So it was like an opening up of the vault and all this energy coming out. That experience of going back affected my creative writing immensely, because you're trying to make sense of this experience and you become much more aware of the ghosts that we carry within us. I mean, you always carry them within you, but the sense of touching physically and smelling and going to Mesauria and seeing the fields and how did I feel when I was a child amongst all this, and having that feeling again, but then you're this at the same time a sense of strangeness because things have changed. And the transformations, the people you met, also getting much closer to Turkish Cypriots and becoming friends and hearing their stories. The specifics of our situation, our history, but it's also what being human is all about. And I think this is where it affected my writing, because we've all been affected in one way or the other by displacement, if not violently, either by moves or the loss of people or the time itself. It was an unexpected turn, the opening, as it was an unexpected turn, the division. And I think writing is always inspired by surprise, by the marvel, by a sudden sense of loss. So by fragmentation, by fractures, things are broken up, get broken in pieces, and you're trying to join them together. And this is where you experiment with words and with sounds and with smells and how you bring it all together. And by the time you've written it, you've gone on to something else. In the sense, I don't plan, I'm going to write a novel, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to organize it, and this is what I'm going to do. I work with fragments. And then, and I don't know where those fragments are going to go. I'm primarily a poet, but then I started writing prose. When you're writing a poem, you're kind of distilling everything and excluding information, trying to compress the narrative, and you distill it and compress it into something lyrical. But often when I would introduce my poems, I would go off into a story. And then I realized people, they want to hear the story as well. So I then started writing stories, but bringing the poetry or the poetic feeling into the story. Whereas in the poem, you're writing the poetic and you're excluding the narrative. And then it remains open-ended always. At some point, I decided to pull the different fragments of my work together and try and piece it together into one volume. I wanted it to be intergeneric, to have an intertwining the poetry and story. And I came up with the title of The Wind Under My Lips because I was inspired by a poem by Ezra Pound, which has the lines, "I came from Alexandria, with the wind under my lips. The metaphor of the wind is very important to me, and also water, but this wind and water and fluidity of water, but the wind, because of the travels and the directions it may take you and the turns that it will take. The memoir section, I would say, takes me up to my 20s. But then the last piece is a more contemporary, humorous, satirical piece of myself as an older academic. I use the term memory fiction. I think it was a challenge because when I was, I think someone defined it as creative nonfiction, and I didn't like that. Why are you calling something nonfiction? Defining something by what is not. And memory is both authentic and it's fictional, because we're always reinventing memory and we remember things in different ways. And then people tell you things and you remember it in different ways again. So the play of memory and the role of memory in who we are and how we live and the quality we put to our life is very important, as well as forgetting, because forgetting is, in effect, is the sculpture of it. Whether it's conscious or unconscious, you're sculpting memory, because memory on its own, if you're just remembering everything, it's overwhelming. I had spent the 60s moving between three islands, like three fragments of myself that I could not piece together in any way into a whole. My life seemed totally incongruous. I had explained my sense of self and home from one island in my early childhood to three islands in my teenage years. And that's how I became solo Trismegistos. I shared the legacy with Hermes Trismegistos, who hailed from Alexandria like my grandfather. So I would be alone and 3 times powerful. This was better than being alone one time. In a multiplicity of aloneness, you could never be lonely. The fact that you write is because it's a way of mediating your relationships with the people, with society, with the political. So there's always reverberations from the inside that you're processing within you. No book comes to an end, and I think it's always open-ended. But it's this labyrinth in the narrative that it never ends. So I'm picking up another beginning and going and taking off from there. I mean, one way I like thinking about it is in the terms of the first Odyssey and the second Odyssey, because the classic Odyssey that's come down to us ends with a homecoming. But in effect, in the oral tradition, it doesn't end there, and there's many other Odysseys in which Odysseus goes home and then he leaves again and decides, well, he wants to keep traveling. And I think this motif is repeated often in literature. I mean, Cavafy deals with it. Of course, in his poem Ithaki, he said the whole point is not to get to the end. The whole point is to, what does this promise of an end mean? But what's really rich is the journey.
Oh, you don't believe it. Oh my God.
You look the same.
I look the same. I'm 73 now.
That's much.
I was honored recently with a volume that was dedicated to my work and my way of thinking. The book is called Shifting Horizons, Crossing Borders, edited by Angelos Evangelou, but the contributors, there's over 20 contributors from all continents, basically. The title indicates a common thread, and some people approach it creatively, some academically, and in effect, it's a result of what I feel is a continuous dialogue that I've had with many countries, many people, and across different generations.
I don't want it necessarily
You're welcome anytime.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy and I feel it.
Try to cut off the hair.
Very have so much out.
Right. So, was that too much? But I don't speak as much as you do, right? I don't know anyone who speaks as much as I do when I spend.
But fluidity is, I think, an important theme that crops up as well as translation, because translation is a broad subject in itself. And in Latin it means the root of it is to move something across. You're moving something across, and that's also the process of writing. It has been an interesting book for me to reflect on and to see how people place you. One thing I feel about language, and this is also what I learned from ritual and the performative aspects of the grassroots ritual, is that there is also the sense that you're expanding your sense of being. So I think to find your being in the world, you have to go beyond identity, and whereas language wants to fix your identity, you have to go beyond that and leave language and go out of language. So I think as a writer, although you're writing in language, you're searching for purity in language, but the pure language is impossible. The book Wind Under My Lips is largely rooted in the village, but it's also very cosmopolitan. And I think this book also reflects that. How do you compromise, or how do you find a compromise? How do you negotiate, rather, is the word, I think, between roots and the many routes you've taken. When we were in Pondicherry filming with Konstantinos, I wanted him to take me walking in between the banyan tree, which is one of the sacred trees of the Indians. And it grows upwards, and then the branches come down, and they take many roots all over the place. So you see this huge tree. I mean, it has a trunk, but it has all kinds of branches that also take roots all over the place. So I think I am rooted in the village, but I'm also multiply rooted. I think create effective connections, and you root yourself in many different places, and they all resonate and reverberate with each other. And it's a challenge because it never stops, but it's an exciting challenge.